That night brought something I never could have predicted. Feeling my son, James, in a way I'd never imagined. It was one of the most astonishing, yet strangely electrifying nights of my life. It all began like any other serene evening at home. After dinner, the house wrapped itself in its usual calm. The faint buzz of the dishwasher hummed from the kitchen, and the floorboards let out soft groans as the house settled for the night. I had no hint that this evening would reshape how I saw everything, my life, my family, even myself. My name is Michael, and until recently, I thought I had it all worked out. At 43, I'm a diligent man who's built a humble but joyful life. My wife, Sarah, and I have been married for 18 years, and though our marriage has had its bumps, I always believed we were unshakable. We have 2 kids, our daughter, Emily, who's off at college, and our 19-year-old son, James, who stays at home while attending community college. James has always been the quiet one. Sarah and I used to joke that he was the stillness to Emily's tempest. She's all fire and drive, while James prefers the solitude of his room, buried in books or tinkering with whatever new project has sparked his curiosity. Over the years, I sometimes worried he might feel outshone by his sister, or even by Sarah and me, but whenever I asked, he'd give a gentle smile and assure me he was okay. Lately, though, I'd noticed subtle changes in him. He seemed more reserved, his usual warm glances turning into quick, fleeting looks. At times, I'd catch him staring at me, his eyes carrying something I couldn't quite place, something searching, almost questioning. I dismissed it as teenage growing pains and didn't dwell on it. Sarah had been away for a few days on one of her regular work trips. She's with an event planning company, often traveling for conferences and planning sessions, so it was nothing out of the ordinary. I was used to holding things together at home while she was gone. With Emily caught up in her studies, it was just James and me in the house. The first evening after Sarah left, James seemed quieter than ever. We shared dinner, and I tried to draw him out, asking about school or the intricate model he'd been crafting for weeks. His answers were polite but short, his eyes flicking to mine before darting away, like something was weighing on him. "You all right, buddy?" I asked, my brow furrowing. "You're pretty quiet tonight." He gave a small smile that didn't quite light up his eyes. "Yeah, I'm okay. Just tired, I guess." I didn't push him. James had always been more reserved, and I figured he'd share if something was really troubling him. So I let it slide and headed to bed. Sarah's side of the bed felt emptier than ever, and I missed her presence, the warmth of her next to me, the soft hum of her voice as she drifted off. I flicked off the light, closed my eyes, and let the house's gentle rhythm lull me to sleep. Sometime deep in the night, I stirred to the faint creak of the bedroom door. My heart skipped as I squinted into the dark, the silence broken only by my breathing and a soft rustle of fabric as someone moved closer. "Sarah?" I mumbled, voice heavy with sleep, thinking she might have come home early to surprise me. No reply came. Instead, the mattress sank slightly as someone sat on the edge of the bed. My groggy mind scrambled to understand, but before I could fully wake, a gentle hand touched my leg. A gesture so familiar, like Sarah's way of grounding me, yet somehow off. The touch lingered, tentative, as if whoever it was wasn't sure of their movements. I opened my eyes, my vision clearing in the dim glow of moonlight seeping through the blinds. My heart froze. Sitting beside me wasn't Sarah. It was James. "James?" I said, my voice a jumble of confusion and alarm. "What are you doing?" He didn't move, his hand still resting lightly on my arm, his face half-shadowed. I could see the tension in his eyes, his lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. "Is everything okay?" I asked, sitting up, my pulse racing. I could feel the warmth of his hand through my shirt. "Why are you here?" "Dad," he whispered, so softly I barely caught it. I didn't mean to wake you." I frowned, my confusion growing. Then why are you here? He hesitated, his hand dropping as he looked down at the floor. I don't know, he said quietly. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. I blinked, unsure what to say. The way he looked at me, so uncertain, so fragile, made my chest tighten. I'm fine, James, I said gently. But you should be in bed. It's late. For a moment, he didn't budge. Then, slowly, he stood, shoulders slumped. Yeah, sorry. I'll go. Something in me wanted to stop him. Maybe the way he looked so defeated, or the strange twist of guilt in my gut. But I let him go, watching him vanish through the door. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. What was that about? Why had he come into my room? And why did it leave me feeling so rattled? But the wildest part? That wasn't the end of it, not even close. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, barely rested after James's unexpected visit. My mind couldn't settle, replaying the moment. The way he'd sat there, the pause in his voice, the way his hand lingered as if he wasn't sure he should be there. It was unsettling, but not in the way I expected. I tried to shake it off as I got ready, but the thoughts stuck with me. Downstairs, James was already at the table, sipping coffee and scrolling on his phone. He looked up as I walked in, his expression unreadable, but there was a stiffness in his posture that hadn't been there before. Morning, I said, trying to keep things light. You're up early. Yeah, he said, voice low. Couldn't sleep. I paused before pouring myself a coffee and sitting across from him. James, about last night. I'm sorry, he cut in, his tone sharper than I expected. I didn't mean to freak you out or anything. I shouldn't have come in. It's okay, I said quickly. I was just worried. You seemed upset. He shrugged, his gaze dropping back to his phone. It's nothing. Forget it. But I couldn't forget it. The way he'd looked at me, the way his touch had felt so deliberate. It was too meaningful to brush off. And oddly, it sparked something in me I couldn't quite pin down. I wanted to ask more, to figure out what was going on in his head, but his body language screamed to leave it alone for now. So, for the moment, I did. The rest of the day passed quietly. James stayed in his room most of the time, and I busied myself with chores and errands, trying to shake the lingering unease. By evening, I was drained and ready to collapse into bed. I tried not to think about the previous night as I slipped under the covers, but my mind kept wandering. What had driven James to come to my room like that? Was he dealing with something he wasn't telling me? Or was it something else? Something I didn't want to admit. I must have dozed off at some point because I woke to the sound of the door creaking open again. My heart jumped as I sat up, squinting into the darkness. Sarah? I murmured, even though I knew it wasn't her. The figure in the doorway hesitated before stepping inside, and the moonlight revealed James's familiar frame. My pulse quickened, a mix of confusion and something I couldn't name. It was like the same scene was playing out again, almost like a dream. James, I said, my voice laced with concern and a touch of frustration. What's going on? Why are you here again? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over and sat on the edge of the bed, just like the night before. He wore a loose t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair messy from sleep, and there was a vulnerability in his posture that tugged at something deep inside me. I'm sorry, he said softly, his gaze fixed on the floor. I know this is weird. I didn't want to be alone. Why? I asked, my voice gentler now. What's going on, James? You can talk to me. He hesitated, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. I don't know, he admitted. It's just, Mom's gone, Emily's not here, and the house feels so empty. I guess I just wanted, to feel close to someone. His words hit me harder than I expected. I'd been so focused on my own loneliness without Sarah that I hadn't thought about how it might be affecting him. He'd always been quiet and reserved, but maybe that was his way of coping with the same feelings I was wrestling with. "It's okay," I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone, James. I'm here." He looked up at me then, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment, the air between us felt heavy with something I couldn't name. I gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze and smiled, trying to lighten the moment. "Come on," I said, patting the bed. "If it helps, you can stay here for a bit. But you've got to promise to actually sleep, all right?" I didn't know why I said it. Maybe because, in some way, I didn't want to be alone either. He nodded, a small smile breaking through his nervous expression. "All right. Thanks, Dad." James lay down on the other side of the bed, keeping a respectful distance. I turned off the light and closed my eyes, trying to ignore the strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. The room was silent except for our breathing, and I could feel his presence beside me, like a warm, steady pulse. At some point, I drifted off, but it was a restless sleep. I woke again in the middle of the night, my senses on edge. I wasn't sure what had roused me at first, but then I felt it. A light, hesitant touch on my arm. "James?" I whispered, my voice groggy. He didn't answer, but his hand lingered, brushing gently against my skin. It was such a tender, deliberate gesture that my breath caught. My mind screamed at me to say something, to stop this before it went further, but my body refused to move. "Dad," he murmured, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry, I turned to look at him, my heart pounding. His face was inches from mine, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and longing that I couldn't ignore. Before I could say anything, he leaned in, his lips brushing my cheek in a gesture so fleeting and gentle, it left me stunned. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling, not from fear, but from something else entirely. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice breaking. I don't know." The room was thick with tension, the silence stretching between us like a taut wire. I wanted to say something to break the spell, but I was frozen, my thoughts racing too fast to make sense. James pulled back slightly, his expression a mix of shame and desperation. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I shouldn't have done that. I'll go." Before I could respond, he was gone, slipping into the darkness and leaving me alone with the overwhelming weight of what had just happened. The strangest part? I didn't mind. In fact, I found myself wanting more, a feeling I'd never known before. For now, I decided to push it aside and invite him to stay again tomorrow, maybe to talk it through. The next day, I couldn't focus on anything. My thoughts kept circling back to James, his hesitant touch, his whispered apology, the way his lips had barely grazed my cheek. It was all too much, too bizarre, yet impossible to shake. James avoided me all morning, staying in his room with the door closed, and I didn't have the courage to knock. I told myself he needed space to process whatever had happened, and honestly, so did I. But as the hours dragged on, the tension in the house became unbearable. By mid-afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood outside his door, my hand hovering inches from the wood. For a moment, I considered walking away, but then I knocked softly. "James?" I called, keeping my voice steady. "Can we talk?" There was a long pause before I heard his footsteps. When he opened the door, he looked different, his usual guarded expression replaced by something softer, almost fragile. It made my chest ache. "Hey," he said quietly, stepping aside to let me in. I walked into his room, taking a moment to glance around. It was neat and orderly, just like him, but there was a heaviness in the air, a shared hesitation. He gestured for me to sit on the bed, and I did, though my nerves were screaming at me to leave. "I just wanted to check in," I said after a moment, "about last night." He winced, his shoulders hunching slightly. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I know it was weird. I shouldn't have—" "James," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "It's okay. I'm not mad. I need to understand what's going on, and I want to tell you something." He hesitated, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "I don't know," he said finally. "I guess I just feel really alone sometimes. When Mom's gone, it's like, I don't know. The house feels empty, even with you here." His words hit me harder than I expected. I'd always tried to be a good father, but hearing him say he felt alone, it stung. "James, I'm sorry if I've made you feel like that," I said gently. "You're not alone, okay? I'm here for you, always." He nodded, but his gaze stayed fixed on the floor. "I know. It's not the same." "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning forward slightly. He took a deep breath, his hands clenching into fists. "It's hard to explain," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's like I want to be close to you, but not in the way I'm supposed to, and I don't know what to do with that." His words hung in the air, heavy and raw, and I felt my stomach twist into knots. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to brush it off, to tell him it was just a phase, but another part, the part I didn't want to acknowledge, felt an inexplicable pull toward him. "James," I began carefully, "I think you're confused. It's normal to feel—" "I'm not confused," he said firmly, cutting me off. His eyes met mine, filled with a quiet intensity that made my heart skip a beat. "I know what I feel. I know it's not normal, but I can't help it." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, we sat there in silence, the weight of his confession pressing down on us like a physical force. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him it would be okay, but I didn't know how. This was uncharted territory, and I was completely lost. I still hadn't told him how I felt, but what was yet to come would flip everything upside down. That night, I tried to act like everything was normal. We had dinner together, talking about mundane things like school and work, but there was an unspoken tension between us that neither of us addressed. I could feel his eyes on me whenever I looked away, and it made my skin prickle with a mix of unease and something else I couldn't name. I wanted to ask him to join me tonight, but when I tried, I just couldn't get the words out. When I finally went to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the night wasn't over. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling as my thoughts raced. James's words played over and over in my mind, his voice so full of vulnerability and longing that it left me breathless. Unable to stay still, I got out of bed and went straight to his room. He was still awake, sitting up in the dim light. "James," I whispered. He didn't answer at first, but I knew he'd heard me. "James, would you like to join me tonight?" "Are you sure, Dad?" he said, his voice soft. "Yes, son," I said, my heart racing. "I'd love to." He didn't hesitate, climbing straight onto my bed, his weight making the mattress dip slightly. He sat there for a moment, hands resting on his knees, before reaching out and placing a hand on my arm as I joined him. "Dad," he said softly, his voice trembling, "please, make me feel like Mom does." I stared at him, my mind screaming to stop this, to say something, anything, to end whatever was happening. But I couldn't. The look in his eyes, the raw emotion in his voice, it left me powerless. "James, this isn't—" I began, but he cut me off. "Don't," he whispered, his hand tightening on my arm. "Just let me stay, please." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Okay," I said finally, my voice shaky, "but we need to talk about this in the morning." He nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Thank you," he murmured as he lay down beside me. I felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me: fear, guilt, and something dangerously close to anticipation. I didn't know what was happening between us, but I knew one thing for certain: this was far from over. I turned, and our eyes met instantly. There was a tension neither of us could resist. We both knew what was about to happen. I sat up, my mind racing. "This isn't okay," I said, though my voice wavered. You need to go back to your room. I don't want to, he said, his eyes locking onto mine. I don't care if it's wrong. I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way. Before I could respond, he reached out, his hand brushing against my cheek. The touch was soft, almost reverent, and it sent a shiver down my spine. James, please, I whispered, my voice trembling. This isn't… He leaned in then, his lips brushing against mine in a kiss that was both tentative and insistent. My mind screamed at me to stop, to push him away, but my body refused to move. For a moment, everything else vanished. The fear, the guilt, the impossibility of it all. There was only James, his touch, his warmth, his desperation. And in that moment, I couldn't bring myself to pull away. The kiss lingered longer than it should have, longer than it had any right to. James's lips were soft, hesitant, but there was an urgency behind them, a desperate need to bridge the gap that had grown between us. My mind kept shouting to stop this, to pull away and put an end to whatever was spiraling out of control. But my body betrayed me, frozen in the moment, unable to act. When he finally pulled back, his eyes searched mine, brimming with a mix of fear, longing, and something that looked dangerously close to hope. James, I said, my voice barely a whisper. We can't. This isn't… I know it's wrong, he interrupted, his voice trembling. But I don't care. I can't keep pretending, Dad. I can't keep hiding how I feel. You don't mean that, I said, shaking my head. You're confused. This isn't real. It is real, he said firmly, his eyes locking onto mine. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. His words hit me like a tidal wave, leaving me breathless and disoriented. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was mistaken, but the conviction in his voice, the raw honesty in his gaze, made it impossible to deny that he truly believed what he was saying. I don't know what to do with this, I admitted, my voice cracking under the weight of the moment. I don't know how to fix this. You don't have to fix anything, he said, reaching out to take my hand. His touch was warm, grounding, and it made my pulse quicken despite my better judgment. Just let me in, please. I pulled my hand away, my chest tightening with a mix of fear and guilt. James, this isn't about what I want. It's about what's right. And this isn't right. He looked down, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I know you think that, he said quietly. But I also know you don't really believe it. Not completely. His words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable, and I felt a pang of something I couldn't quite name. Was it guilt? Shame? Or was it the terrifying realization that a part of me didn't want to push him away? For a moment, I stayed silent, but then a spark of excitement hit me. I looked into his eyes, and I think he saw it too. All at once, the tension shifted into something entirely different from what we'd been talking about. From the way he moved, quickly, decisively, I knew we'd both been feeling this for days. That kiss had awakened something in me I couldn't ignore. After a silence that stretched far too long, I said, "Kiss me again, James." He looked surprised. "What?" "Do it, James," I said, my voice steady now. "Like you said before. Pretend it's what Mom would do." I didn't hold back anymore. Something had shifted inside me, and I let it all go. James leaned in, and we kissed again. This time different, deeper, more intense. His touch mirrored Sarah's in ways that felt hauntingly familiar, moving from gentle to fervent. It went beyond kissing, spiraling into something more, something I couldn't stop, and didn't want to. I won't go into specifics, but it was incredible, intense, tender, and, from his side, maybe a little painful. I don't know why, but he'd taken his role as Sarah seriously. I could tell from the way he said my name afterward, lying there, both of us unsure of what had just happened. "Are you okay, son?" I asked, my voice soft. "Yes, Dad," he said. "Don't worry about me. Let me go to the bathroom for a moment, and let's just go to sleep." That's the last thing I remember clearly. I think I drifted off while he was gone. The morning after, I was up early, thinking about what had happened. I was halfway through my coffee when I heard footsteps on the stairs. I didn't need to turn around to know it was James. His presence seemed to fill the room before he even spoke. "Morning," he said softly, his voice tentative. I turned to face him, offering a small smile. "Morning, coffee's on the counter." He nodded, walking over to pour himself a cup. For a moment, we stood in silence, the tension between us thick. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "James," I began, setting my mug down. "We need to talk." He stiffened, his shoulders tensing as he turned to face me. "About last night?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "About everything," I said. "I need to understand what's going on with you. What's going on with us?" He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I don't know," he admitted. I feel like I've been holding this in for so long, and I couldn't anymore. I know it's wrong, Dad. I know that, but I can't help how I feel." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he didn't really feel this way, but the look in his eyes told me otherwise. This wasn't some fleeting thought or teenage confusion. It was something deeper, something that scared me more than I cared to admit. "James," I said carefully, "I need you to understand that what you're feeling, it's complicated. It's not something we can just act on." He nodded, his expression pained. "I know," he said quietly, "but it doesn't make it go away." The room fell silent again, the weight of his confession hanging between us like a thick fog. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him everything would be okay, but I didn't know how. This was uncharted territory, and I felt like I was walking a tightrope, one wrong step away from falling. The rest of the day was awkward, to say the least. James stayed in his room for most of it, and I tried to distract myself with chores and errands, but my mind kept drifting back to him. Every time I thought about the way he'd looked at me, so raw, so vulnerable, I felt my chest tighten. By the time evening rolled around, I was sitting in the living room, nursing a glass of whiskey, when James appeared in the doorway. He looked hesitant, his hands shoved into his pockets, but there was a determination in his eyes that made my heart race. "Can I sit?" he asked, his voice quiet. I nodded, unable to find the words to refuse him. He walked over and sat on the couch beside me, leaving a careful amount of space between us. "I'm sorry," he said after a long silence, "for making things weird. I didn't mean to. I just didn't know how to handle it." "I know," I said, my voice soft. "It's okay. We'll figure this out." He looked at me then, his eyes filled with so much vulnerability that it made my chest ache. "Do you hate me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Of course not," I said immediately, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I could never hate you, James. You're my son." He flinched slightly at the word but didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into my touch, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. "I just want to be close to you," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't care how. I need you." His words broke something inside me, and I pulled him into a hug, holding him tightly as he buried his face in my shoulder. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'll always be here." For a moment, it felt like everything might be okay, that we could find a way to move past this and rebuild our relationship. But as he pulled back and looked up at me, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears, I felt that familiar tension creeping back in. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "for not giving up on me." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. As he stood to leave, I reached out and grabbed his hand, stopping him in his tracks. "James," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "we'll figure this out together." He smiled, a small, tentative smile that sent a pang of warmth through my chest. "I know we will," he said. And as he walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that our story was far from over. The lines we'd drawn were already starting to blur, and though I didn't know what the future held, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again.
Thank you for listening. Please share your thoughts, like this video if you found it helpful, and subscribe for more.